Hello and welcome. We are taking a look at the ELCAN Specter DR 1.5/6 prism optic. If you want to find out more information about what comes inside the box and how this thing really is built and all the finer things on it, please go check out my 1/4 review I did a while ago. I go very in depth about what this thing is and all of its basic controls. If you've already seen that video and you're just joining to watch this, thank you very much. But this is basically the exact same optic as the 1/4, except this is a 1.5 and a 6. Now, for anyone that is unsure of why someone would want to buy an optic like this, it's very simple. You want something that is insanely robust. You want something that is military proven, that has an outstanding track record and impeccable build quality. Also, you're buying this for the maximum magnification that also performs at the lower magnification. What does that even mean? See, I don't get that. You're buying this as a 6x prism that is perfect as a 6x prism. Absolutely unbelievable as a 6x prism, but also gives you the option of being a 1.5x prism. The 1.5x is good on this, but it's nowhere near as good as the 6x. And that was the exact same sort of understanding that I came to with the 1/4. You buy the 1/4 because you want an amazing 4x prism that also just so happens to be capable of being used at 1x. Another thing that you have to know with this is that you're not going to be buying it because it is lightweight and svelte. Far from it. It's like a brick. You're putting a brick on top of your gun. But that brick is going to last you forever, probably, and going to have some of the best optical glass that you will see. It is beautiful. But enough about me ranting about this. Let's get behind this thing and see what it's actually like to use. As far as the reticle options, there are two, a 556 BDC and a 762 BDC. That is all. As far as the illumination, you get two types. You get the super bright center dot and the full crosshair illuminated. It's really awesome that they give you both of those options. Switching between minimum to maximum magnification on this yields no interesting or weird things going on optically. Everything is beautiful and the eye relief maintains a constant 2.75 inches. As you just saw, the illumination on the center dot gets insanely bright. As far as the crosshair illumination, it is much more mild. However, you're only going to really need that in the darkest of environments, so it makes sense not to have that be super bright. But that center dot, oh, that center dot. It actually gets too bright in most environments, which is exactly what anybody wants in illumination on anything. For anyone wondering how this thing handles being adjusted for 0, you have two turn knobs. The front one literally just moves it left to right, and the rear one moves the entire section up and down. And it works quite well. I would think that dirt and debris can get inside the mechanism and jam it up. However, once it's zeroed, it's going to stay zeroed, and that's where you're going to leave it. But it works well. It's a very odd thing to use and experience, but once you get the hang of it, it really isn't that bad. Because this thing has a minimum 1.5x, I don't think it's anywhere near as dynamic as something that has a 1x, whether it be a 1.4 or an offset red dot, or an LPVO for that matter. You can run an offset red dot for this. In fact, you could buy it as a bundle direct through ELCAN or ATI Armament Technologies Incorporated, and it comes with their proprietary red dot. I mean, it's a standard footprint. I believe it's an RMR footprint. Don't quote me. But you can buy accessories for this thing as much as you want. It also comes with iron sights on top, but they're a little bit ridiculous because the length on them is like 3 inches, 3.5 inches. It's like a pistol's radius. It's horrible, but it's there. The 1.5, like I said, is good, but the 6x is oh so good. Keep in mind we're at 81 yards to that tree. So 6x at that distance, I'm not expecting that much, but the image is so flat. And the view through this thing is gargantuan, just like the 1/4. It is so breathtakingly beautiful getting behind this that it's hard to put into words. The illumination, as you saw, gets nuclear bright. And keep in mind, it's not a perfect sunny day. It's a little overcast, but still, it is insanely bright. The 1.5 does have a little bit of fisheye at any distance. You can notice that right around the center. Things warp around a little bit. It's a little bit harder to see on camera than it is in person, but it really isn't that bad, and it's more than completely serviceable. Because of its 42mm front objective, it also lets in a ton of light. At 1.5x, you can see there's almost no light transmission differences from ambient light to light looking through it. Also, when I don't crop the image, you can see that there is a little bit of fisheye that I was talking about earlier. It's, again, really not bad, and you won't really notice it unless you're looking for it. At 6x, we still have the exact same amount of light coming through this thing. In fact, even more, because there's fewer lenses being passed through, or at least having the light pass through. It's excellent. So is the illumination on this thing. Look at that. Oh, it's menacing. It is gorgeous. There's nothing to fault on this thing, illumination-wise, glass-wise, or even reticle-wise. I think running with a 5.56 and 7.62 NATO BDC is a smart move for them, because a lot of these go to militaries. So why wouldn't you want to run something that's standardized in that regard? The BDC is very easy to read, very easy to pick up, and just efficient. That's actually the best word I could use for it. It's efficient at giving you a ton of information without being overly complicated. It's very easy to read and pick up at any sort of environment, at any sort of distance. And you know what, speaking of distance, let's push this thing out a little bit further and see just how good the glass is. Let's bring this thing out to a much larger area so we could stretch its legs. Beautiful day, slightly cloudy, but wonderful conditions. This was taken, I think, like mid-August or so. Illumination on full is mwah, chef's kiss beautiful. The reticle is very easy to pick up even without the illumination. Panning across at 1.5x, you can see that fisheye and distortion I was telling you about. It's much more apparent when you have things at varying distances. I go a little bit too fast for my own good, but you get the idea. Hopefully none of you got seasick from that. Cropping the image at our first solar panel around 500 yards, and you can see everything is in focus. Edge-to-edge sharpness on this thing is insane. Those bushes, they're like 10 yards in front of us, and that farthest power tower that we can see is roughly 2,000 yards away. And everything is razor sharp. The colors on this thing are so vivid. Everything is just so beautiful and lush. And the same thing happens at 6x. In fact, I think it performs even better at 6x than it does at 1.5x, because the image is perfectly flat. It actually gets a little bit brighter because there's less glass that the light has to transmit through. And we are left with just a true representation of what we're looking at downrange. It's breathtaking. Genuinely breathtaking. The 1.4 was so beautiful at 4x, I just stayed at it. I stayed behind it for about 20 minutes at the range, just looking at things. I wasn't even shooting. I was just panning across at different targets, watching people miss a target, watching the splash hit the dirt, and it was breathtaking. This 6x is breathtaking. The view through this thing is massive. Just look at it. And because it has a fairly large eye relief at 2.75 inches, you're comfortable behind this thing. It's not like you're behind an ACOG where you have almost half that eye relief. It is sensational. I can't talk enough good about it. But let's see how this thing's Eyebox is. And more importantly, its image stability, or at least that's what I like to call it. Image stability is when you're not perfectly behind the optic. Does the image degrade quickly, and does the reticle lose any sharpness? I am delighted to say that it has neither of those attributes. It is razor sharp up until the point you can't look through it anymore. And because technically these are second focal plane scopes, you see the illumination way off into the shadows, and ELCAN claims, let me look it up, yep, 7mm on the exit pupil, which isn't the biggest, but is far from the smallest. It really does seem like it's a pretty good combination, all things considered, especially when we start looking at some comparisons with this thing. Making the Eyebox live for you all a little bit more, we're going to just dance around it with the camera. You can see on top you have the ghost ring for the little iron sight setup, which is just, it's so cute. But at 1.5x, it is good. That illumination really helps draw your eye right to the center, and you can be really far away from this thing or choke up on it pretty good and still have a fair view looking through it. Bring it up to its maximum at 6x, and despite the fact that we're at much higher magnification, it still performs very good. Keep in mind, you're going to really still require a good cheek weld on this thing, but it's not going to be the end of the world if you're slightly off of it in an awkward position. Moving right along to the comparison segment, we're going to start out with the ELCAN's little brother, the 1/4. These are basically the same. I can't really say much else about it. The view through both of these are insanely large, basically completely even with one another. And when we look at some of the statistics that we get from ELCAN's website, you can understand as to why. So price, the 1.5/6 is around $2,500, the 1/4 $2,200. Field of view, they're going to be different because it's a 1x versus 1.5 and then a 4 versus a 6. But the 1.5 is rated at 88 feet at 100 yards at 1.5x, and the 1/4 is 146 feet at 100 yards. As far as their top end, at 6x you have 21 feet, and at 4x you have 34 feet. So that will give you a pretty good understanding of what's what. And then focusing on the same targets at, well, their maximum magnification, you get a much better sense of just how much you can see downrange. Despite the fact that the 1.5/6 seems much larger than the 1/4, the weight is only 2 ounces heavier at 25 ounces, whereas the 1/4 is right around 23 ounces. However, everything else is about the same. The eye relief on both of them is claimed to be 2.75 inches, and both of them have the exact same exit pupil at 7mm. Now, which one of these do I recommend for who? It all depends on what your ultimate goal is. If you're looking to extend your range a little bit further, go with the 1.5/6. If you think you're going to be inside a few hundred yards, like 400 or 500 yards and you want to have the ability to have a pretty good 1x, go with the 1/4. There's no wrong answer here. It's just what's going to fit your bill better. However, if you do decide that you need one of these in your life, then you're fine. Go with whichever one you think is going to work best for you. If you plan on running an offset red dot anyway, go with the higher magnification. Go with the 1.5/6, because at that point you're going to have a 1x on your red dot on top, but you're going to have a higher end magnification to be able to not only hit your target more efficiently, but also help with target identification, which is a huge factor that we have to take into consideration. The 4x is still capable of getting you out to greater distances. We're looking at 300 yards on these paper targets, but that 6x just makes it a little bit easier to figure out what is what. Ultimately, again, it comes down to you and your needs, but I really do not think you can go wrong with either of these amazing optics. Next up is the ELCAN versus the Steiner S432. The S432 is discontinued, but they do pop up every once in a while. And when you find them, you could find them for around $1,000 or so. But these things retailed for around, like, I want to say $1,400, $1,500. This is a 4x prism, but this is the only optic I could think of that rivals the ELCANs in as far as just raw view down range. It was, and still is, the largest optic I have ever gotten behind. Despite the fact it has a 3.15-inch amount of eye relief, this thing has just 42 feet at 100 yards. That is 8 feet more than what the ELCAN 1/4 is capable of at 4x. It's huge. It's giant. But it's also 25 ounces and much smaller than the 1.5/6 or the 1/4. It is just a giant honking piece of glass. That's basically all it is. Optically, it rivals, I would say, both ELCANs, but it's a one-trick pony. The reticles aren't as easy to pick up. The illumination is nowhere near as good, But if you're looking for something on the cheaper end and you want to have a really amazing 4x, the Steiner S432 is the way to go. You can run a lot of different accessories on the S432 if you want to run offset red dots or iron sights or whatever. So it really is quite versatile. As far as the build quality, it felt really good in my hands. The S series, I think they were running on LMGs, so they were running them on machine guns, and that's why they have such a large field of view. So downrange shooters can keep an eye on their surroundings. And that's part of the reason why it's so heavy, because this thing it feels like you could just throw it against the wall and it will just laugh at you. It's as close as I can make to a competitor of something else that I've reviewed, with the exception of this. The Trijicon ACOG TA31D is also a 4X prism, but unlike the S432, it only comes in around 10 ounces, but it costs about the same as what you could find the S432s for used or so, at around $1,100. It is a 4X prism, so yes, it's not going to be the direct competitor against the 1.5/6, but maybe you're not 100% sold on that yet. Maybe you think a 4X would be fine. The TA31D rivals the ELCAN and the S432 as far as view looking through it. However, it does not rival the S432 with the overall field of view. At 100 yards, it's only 36.8 feet, which just doesn't seem right considering how big the Steiner is. But when you compare it to the 1/4 ELCAN, it's 34 feet at 4X. So it is much larger than what the ELCAN is capable of producing. However, it also has a larger exit pupil at 8.1 millimeter. So you'd think, oh wow, it must be really easy to get behind. Oh no. Whereas both ELCAN options have 2.75 inches of eye relief, the TA31D, 1.5 inches of eye relief. It's a joke. It's a joke. But it's par for the course. It is a very small, quite lightweight prism, and as a result, it's got to sacrifice itself somewhere, and that comes in the form of eye relief. The TA33 had significantly more eye relief. Let me look on my chart real quick. That was 1.9 inches, which is still, if you think about it, it's 25% more than what this TA31 is capable of producing, but it's still nowhere near as forgiving as the other two options we just talked about. Another thing to take into consideration is that the illumination on these are tritium and fiber optic tubes. There is no way that you can adjust it manually to suit your needs at any particular time and place. So for some people, that's going to be an automatic DQ. Does it work? Yes, it works. But if you want the ability to adjust it on the fly, you are SOL when it comes to most of the ACOG products. Now, is this a good direct comparison between them? Yeah, if you're in the market for a good prism, absolutely. It's just, again, you have to figure out those gives and takes and what you're willing to give up for what you really want. Oh, and the TA31D also has offset iron sights, very similar to both the ELCANs. But again, it's just a thing that you have to not hopefully rely on because it's not that great. I'd just rather bead sight it down the side of the gun. And lastly, what happens if you're not sold on having a prism? What happens if you're in the camp where you can go either which way with an optic for your setup? Well, I'd recommend something similar to the Trijicon TR25, if not the TR25. Just like the TA31D that we looked at, the TR25s are powered with tritium and a fiber optic tube. However, you can buy battery-powered versions, but I really do feel that the TR25s optically surpass most of the other offerings from Trijicon, unless you're talking about the Credo 1-8 in first focal plane, but that's a horse of a completely different color. This TR25 is a 1 to 6 second focal plane LPVO. They come in around $1,000, and without a mount, they weigh in around 19 ounces. So the overall package would be about the same weight as the 1.56 or the 1.4. As far as the overall length, it's 11 inches, so significantly longer than the ELCANs, which are right around 6 to 7 inches, depending on which one you go with. So if you're looking for a smaller package, go with one of the ELCANs. However, if you want the flexibility and the adjustability of having better in-between magnifications, or what happens if you really want a good 1x, but you also want a slightly higher maximum magnification and you don't plan on running an offset red dot, then something like an LPVO would probably be a really good recommendation for you. As far as the field of view, the 1x on the TR25 is exceptional, 117.5 feet at 1x, but only 18 feet at 6x, and that is very visible here. Both of these at 6x at 200 yards. There is a clear winner which one has more information. It's going to be the ELCAN. Not only do the targets look actually larger looking through the ELCAN, but we also have just a much larger view looking through the ELCAN. The TR25 is exceptional when it comes to the view looking through it for its size and weight for a 1 to 6 second focal plane LPVO, but it cannot hold a candle. It can't hold anything up to any of the other options we just looked at. Sheesh, I'm getting tongue-tied. But again, it comes down to what you want. The exit pupil on the TR25 is 12 millimeter to 4.1. So technically the 6X on the TR25 will be a little bit trickier to get behind as opposed to this ELCAN. But the eye relief is also a little bit further at 3.9 inches versus 2.75. So lots of gives and takes here. It just depends on what you want. All of these options that I've talked about are great in their own right, and I'd recommend any of them to any of you out there as long as you find the one that's going to be best for you. You know, I lied to all of you a little bit. There is one fatal flaw with the ELCAN Specters, and that are the use of the arms, the QD levers. The owner of this scope actually had one break on him. Fortunately, ELCAN is great company, and they sent him a replacement. No problem, no questions, no nothing. But it's still something that you have to take into consideration. The arms are notorious for having problems and breakages. I haven't personally experienced them, thankfully, but it's the only thing that I have to mention, because if I don't, I'm not doing my job properly. The arms can be a bit of an issue. The final point that I'm going to make is a lot of people have been asking me, what's the best this? What's the best that? And it's impossible for me to answer, because the best really comes down to an objective opinion. What's going to be the best for you isn't going to be the best for me or somebody else. So it's really important, it's really crucial, I feel, that you find out what's going to be the best fit for you. That is why I make my reviews the way that I do. So this way you can make a better, educated, informed guess on what's going to be a better option for your setup. And that's all I try to do. These ELCANs, specifically this 1.56, is as amazing of an optic as you could possibly get. I can't think of anything much more robust than this, much more battle-proven than this, and capable optics-wise. The only negative I would say is we see a lot of the body of the scope when we look through this thing. That's the only real detriment. However, it's par for the course given how durable this thing is, how forgiving it is to get behind, and how insanely large the view is when you get behind it. It's all about give and takes and finding balance. Where's that balance point for you? If you're looking for a near uncompromised prism experience that's going to maximize your view downrange, your view looking through it, insanely nice looking reticles with illumination and build quality, well, you're going to have to pay for it. And unfortunately, that costs around $2,500 for this. But if this is what you're looking for, I really do feel that it's worth every penny. With all that being said, a huge thank you to the individual that sent this in. The 1/4 was sent in to me by ELCAN, so this way I could test it and review it and then send it back. But this one was sent in by one of my paid supporters. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to review something that has yet again blown me away by its performance. Just look at that image. I could stand here all day and look at that. And hopefully you can too if you buy one. Thank you all very much for watching. And as always, I'll see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my SubscribeStar subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.